Picture this: a grand ballroom filled with Europe's most elite, draped in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. The air buzzes with whispers, eyes darting between guests, and the soft clink of champagne glasses. Among them stands a simple woman. No jewels, no designer dress, just an honest smile and quiet confidence. But instead of admiration, she faces sneers and mocking laughs. The very people who rule this glittering world dismiss her as an outsider, someone who doesn't belong in their high society. Little did they know, her story was about to turn their world upside down. This isn't just a tale of rags to riches. It's a story of resilience, mystery, and a twist of fate that no one saw coming. How does a simple woman, ignored and ridiculed at one of Europe's most prestigious galas, suddenly become the rightful heir to an $80 billion throne? What secrets does she carry, and what forces are working behind the scenes to change her destiny forever? Today, we dive into her journey, from the cold stares and whispered doubts to the shockwaves that ripple through royal circles once her inheritance is revealed. As you watch, ask yourself, what would you do if your entire life changed overnight? Could you handle the pressure, the expectations, and the enemies that come with unimaginable wealth and power? The story is just beginning, and the truth behind this woman's rise is far more complex than anyone could imagine. Stay tuned, because the moment she claims that throne, everything changes, and not everyone will be happy about it. What happens next will surprise you. For years, no one really knew much about her. She lived quietly in a small town, far from the glitter and gold of the royal courts. A simple life filled with everyday struggles, working hard, keeping her family together, and dreaming of something bigger, but never imagining it could actually happen. She was never the kind of person people expected to make headlines or shake the foundations of European royalty. That was until a letter arrived, a letter that would change everything. The letter was mysterious, sealed with a crest no one around her had seen before. It spoke of a distant relative she never knew existed, and a hidden fortune tied to a lineage older than most could remember. Suddenly, the world she had always known felt like a distant memory, replaced by a reality full of uncertainty and whispers of betrayal. The simple woman now had to navigate a maze of legal battles, suspicious allies, and old family secrets that some powerful people wanted to keep buried. But why was she the one chosen to inherit such a vast fortune and power? What made her the last hope for a throne that had been the center of political intrigue for decades? People in the highest circles began to ask questions, and not all of them were kind. Some saw her as a threat, an unworthy outsider who could upset the delicate balance of power. Others, though, quietly supported her, hoping she might bring change to a system long marked by corruption and greed. As her story spread, the simple woman found herself at the center of a storm she never asked for. Every step she took was watched, every move scrutinized. Would she rise to the challenge, or would the shadows of doubt and opposition pull her back into obscurity? The answers were still out there, waiting to be uncovered. As the news of her inheritance began to spread, the atmosphere in the royal circles grew tense. Behind closed doors, whispers turned into heated debates. Some powerful figures saw her rise as a dangerous disruption, a challenge to traditions carefully maintained for centuries. Others, surprisingly, were curious. Could this simple woman actually bring something new to a world ruled by old money and long-held grudges? The palace halls, once calm and predictable, now echoed with uncertainty. Meanwhile, the woman herself faced a whirlwind of challenges. Suddenly thrust into a world where every gesture was analyzed, she had to learn fast. Trusted advisors offered help, but she wasn't sure who to believe. Some wanted to guide her genuinely, while others seemed to have their own hidden agendas. Old family members, once silent or absent, reappeared with demands and accusations, hoping to reclaim what they thought was theirs. She was caught between loyalty, suspicion, and the overwhelming pressure of proving herself worthy. On the outside, the public watched with fascination and skepticism. Some saw her as a symbol of hope, proof that anyone could change their destiny no matter where they came from. Others dismissed her as a pawn in a larger game, waiting for the moment she'd be discarded. The media frenzy added another layer of stress, twisting stories and fueling rumors that made it harder for her to find solid ground. And then there was the throne itself, a symbol not just of wealth, but of power that shaped nations. The people who had held it for generations weren't ready to let go without a fight. There were alliances forming in shadows, and threats whispered in quiet rooms. The simple woman was no longer just a newcomer. She was a key player in a high-stakes game where the rules kept changing. How far would she have to go to secure her place? The next moves would be critical, and the outcome still unknown. The pressure kept mounting as the day of the official announcement drew closer. Every move she made was under a microscope, every word she spoke analyzed for weakness or strength. Invitations to secret meetings and urgent calls from mysterious figures became part of her new reality. She was no longer just the simple woman from a small town. She was now the heart of a battle that stretched far beyond her own understanding. The very throne she was set to inherit seemed to pulse with tension, as if warning her of the dangers ahead. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed powerful enemies were plotting behind the scenes, trying to block her claim by any means necessary. Others whispered of old scandals resurfacing, ready to be used against her. Even those who had quietly supported her began to question if she could handle the weight of an $80 billion legacy, tangled in decades of political intrigue and personal betrayal. Yet, despite the fear and doubt, there was something undeniable about her courage, something that made people wonder if she might be the one to finally break the cycle. Her closest allies urged caution, but the simple woman knew she couldn't afford to back down. Every step forward risked stirring more conflict, but retreat wasn't an option either. As the gala approached, the event where her inheritance would be officially recognized, tension reached a fever pitch. The grand hall that once rejected her would soon witness a confrontation that could change everything. Eyes from across Europe's elite would be watching, waiting to see if she would rise or fall. In those final moments before the announcement, a question hung in the air. Could a simple woman, mocked and underestimated, really claim the throne and change a legacy built on power and secrets? The answer was still hidden, waiting to unfold. Just hours before the gala, as final preparations buzzed through the palace corridors, an unexpected envelope arrived, delivered not through official channels, but slipped quietly beneath her door. Inside was a single photograph and a short, handwritten note. The photo showed a younger version of the woman's mother, standing beside one of the most powerful former royals, a man long thought to have no surviving heirs. The note was simple, but chilling. Asterisk, you were never meant to know. Asterisk. In that moment, everything shifted. Questions she never thought to ask began to claw at her. Had her mother kept her true identity a secret all these years? Was the story of a distant inheritance just the surface of something far deeper, more dangerous? The possibility that her connection to the throne wasn't a fluke, but part of a well-buried royal bloodline, turned everything upside down. And if it were true, then someone had gone to great lengths to hide it. But why? Meanwhile, whispers of betrayal began to surface within her inner circle. A trusted advisor suddenly vanished without explanation. Documents that once supported her claim were now being challenged by a powerful faction within the royal council, arguing that her inheritance was based on a technical error, one they planned to expose during the gala. What was once a ceremony of acceptance was quickly becoming a battlefield. As she stood in front of the grand mirror, dressed in the same gown they once laughed at, she realized this wasn't just about wealth or a title anymore. It was about legacy, truth, and power, real power that others would kill to control. The gala was no longer just a public event. It was the stage for a final reckoning. And somewhere in that glittering crowd, someone was waiting to strike first. The ballroom glittered with golden chandeliers and nervous anticipation as the gala finally began. Cameras flashed, guests murmured, and all eyes turned toward the simple woman who now carried the weight of an $80 billion legacy. But just as the orchestra struck its opening note and the royal official stepped forward to begin the ceremony, the doors swung open with a sharp, echoing creak. A stranger, cloaked in black and flanked by armed security, walked in, holding a sealed dossier and demanding to speak. The room fell silent. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a wave. The man introduced himself as a legal representative from an unknown branch of the royal family, one that had been presumed dead for decades. Inside the dossier were documents that challenged everything: birth records, secret correspondences, and, most shocking of all, a second will, handwritten and signed, dated only weeks before the original heir's death. According to this new will, the throne and fortune were never meant for her alone. Gasps filled the room. If the documents were real, it meant she wasn't the only heir. She might not even be the primary one. A hidden half-brother, raised abroad under a different name, was now being introduced into the picture. And he wasn't just claiming part of the inheritance, he wanted control of it all. The media outside the gala erupted in chaos, and security scrambled to confirm identities, while palace officials argued in hushed tones. The simple woman stood frozen, not out of fear, but fury. Not only was her past rewritten in front of the world, but the very people who welcomed her were now divided. Trust was vanishing fast. Allies turned cold. The royal court had become a battlefield, and this new twist threatened to unravel everything she had fought for. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. As tension hung thick in the air, the simple woman stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. She demanded to see the documents. With the world watching, she stood in front of the council, reporters, and the so-called half-brother. As the papers were examined under the sharp eyes of royal legal advisors, a hush fell again. Then came the breakthrough. Buried deep in the handwritten was a clause written in an old dialect, one that only a handful of scholars still understood. It specified that the throne and full inheritance could only be passed to a descendant born on royal grounds her mother had secretly returned to just before giving birth. Her half-brother, though biologically linked, was born overseas. By royal law, that made him ineligible. Guests filled the hall as the truth settled in. The dossier meant to take her down had accidentally confirmed her legitimacy. The so-called rival heir had unwittingly strengthened her claim. The council had no choice but to declare her the rightful heir, publicly and officially. But just as applause broke out and she was about to be crowned, a final, quiet interruption shook her to the core. An elderly woman stepped forward from the crowd, her eyes filled with tears. She revealed herself as the woman's aunt, long presumed dead, who had gone into hiding to protect her niece from those who once plotted to erase her bloodline. She had watched in silence for years, waiting for the right moment to come forward. The room fell silent once more, not from fear, but from awe. The simple woman had not only reclaimed her place, but uncovered a hidden past that made her story even more powerful. The throne was finally hers, but now so was the truth. The silence slowly turned into applause, soft at first, then rising like a wave through the grand hall. The once mobbed woman stood tall at the center of it all, no longer just a symbol of surprise, but of strength, truth, and unshakable grace. The crown, once kept out of reach, was finally placed in her hands, not just by law, but by acceptance. She didn't just inherit the $80 billion throne. She earned every piece of it. In the days that followed, the palace gates opened in ways they hadn't in generations. She invited community leaders, historians, and people from all walks of life to take part in shaping the future of the monarchy. The old guard, once skeptical, couldn't deny the shift in energy. Even her half-brother, after the dust settled, met with her privately. There was no bitterness, just understanding. They shared more than a last name now. They shared history, loss, and a strange kind of bond neither had expected. The aunt who had stayed hidden for decades was given a place of honor, her quiet sacrifice finally acknowledged. And as the media storm calmed, the world saw more than a headline. They saw a woman who had walked through mockery, doubt, betrayal, and power games, and stood her ground with nothing but honesty and resilience. What started as a story of a simple woman at a European gala had become something far bigger. It was a reminder that true royalty isn't measured by wealth or titles, but by how someone rises when the world tries to keep them small. And as she looked out from the palace balcony that evening, crown in hand and passed behind her, the future felt wide open, and finally hers to shape.